We're here today with Guradian Angels founder and CEO Curtis Sliwa. We're really delighted to have you. I am a fan, and we'd like to talk a little bit about what Curtis does, and also we're going to talk specifically, because Curtis is a dad, about how he works with his own child in terms of not exposing him to violence that is inappropriate. So I think the first question I'd like to talk about, since we mentioned the fact that Curtis is a dad, is how do you balance your busy career with being a dad and giving your son enough time?
Well, I never give him enough time. That's the problem. So you have to figure out the time I give him, boy, it better be special time, top shelf, 5-star time. So with my son, I exposed him to different things early on, and he took right to trains. I thought he'd take to baseball, right? He was momentarily, but he was into trains, and it must have been in the DNA. Because my son, little Anthony Chester, loves trains. The 6, the 4, the 5, the A, the B, the C. In fact, it actually helped him because he was having a problem with his speech. He was finding it very difficult to talk, and I said, a Sliwa not being able to talk, this is a problem because he's going to be challenged at a very early age when most children weren't. So I was trying to find all the different things that he really lit up to. And he lit up to a lot of things, like dirty water hot dogs. The mother said no, she wanted soy dogs. I said, please, okay. So trains was something we could agree on. Since I'm on the trains a lot, I would take my son on a Sunday, and we would ride down to Coney Island to the yards. He would see all the trains. He would get excited. I would see other kids on the trains, unfortunately, without, having a male role model or a female role model or anyone. But they were like train buffs. And so I let him hang out with these kids because, he needs other influences, particularly kids who are not like him,
right?
Who may not be as protected.
Right.
And so I'm always exposing him to these things. And some people may think that I'm like off the edge. But like the other day, we walked into the number 6 train. There was an emotionally disturbed person there. Everybody was moving away. I moved in on the emotionally disturbed person with Anthony because I didn't want him to be afraid of this person.
Right.
Look, I deal with these people all the time. They're really harmless. They're more of a harm to themselves.
Right.
And he was very calm because I was calm, whereas everyone else was freaking out. They were having an X-lax attack. Now, if I told his mother this story, she'd be having an X-lax attack. But I truly believe that I want to expose him to things without necessarily getting him hurt or harmed or burnt in the process.
Right.
So I take a sort of radical extreme way. I take him with me and expose him to a lot of the things that I'm doing on a regular basis and see if anything sticks. And definitely the subways have stuck. He can't get enough of the subways.
I love the subways as well. In fact, I took my son down a couple weekends ago. We took the 1 train all the way down to South Ferry, and then we took the Staten Island ferry over to Staten Island and back, and it was a great trip with trains and boats. So,
because the senses get so stimulated.
Yeah.
There's excitement, the adrenaline is pumping, there are new things.
Right.
It stimulates him to ask me questions, and then he sees my interaction with other people, and then I get him to interact, forcing him to have conversations with people, because normally he'd be very sedate. So for me, it works. It may not work for others, but I would just suggest you expose them to as many different things and see what really lights them up. And then if they're really activated, you want to expose them more and more, because that may actually jumpstart them in terms of thinking, forming thoughts, having beliefs, opinions, and being more gregarious than just laid back and sort of like a stump on a lump.
Right.
A stump on a lump. I think I just created a new word there.
So what you're talking about is almost like a concept of overexposure, and you being a strong presence and a calm presence in difficult situations is really what the learning is that's taking place for your son, because he can model your behaviors in those situations. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. And a child is always going to get frightened. They're always going to react to other people in the crowd. I remember recently, it was right before Christmas, and we were going to a friend's house, and he had his entire family over. And all the children got together. They were going to go down to the jungle gym, and they were going to play around, and all the dads were going with them just to basically supervise and let them have a good time. And one of the young girls got her hand stuck in the elevator door. And it really looked bad. I thought the elevator had swallowed her arm. I said, what am I going to do about this?
Right.
And they're all looking at me.
Right.
But her father was like totally off the hook, totally freaking out, screaming, yelling, hollering. And so I realized my son was watching me, so I had to be really cool, calm, and collected. Worked with the father. It didn't turn out that badly for the young lady. We had to rush her to the hospital. No bones were broken. But boy, if you would have seen that situation, even for someone scary. Like me, who has been in almost combat situations, I thought for sure that this young lady's arm might have to be extricated or that there'd be a series of stitches. And then it had to have the calming effect. So what I did was I said, let me take my son with the father and the mother and the child to the ER.
Right.
To the emergency ward. Let him see there's a process here. That she's crying, the nurse is attending to her, he's looking all around, he's seeing other people who are sick and some who are really seriously in need and others who are just there to give solace to their family and friends. And so again, another learning experience, all based on the fact that he had an attachment to this young girl. Right. And he wanted to see it come to its conclusion, which eventually it did. She was released, she came back, and everyone had a good time the rest of the night.
Right. Right. One of the great things that you've talked about is how you like to expose your son to all these different situations. You're the calming presence. You can't always do that, especially when your son might be tuned into a TV set, which is pumping out a lot of negative images and a lot of violence. I know that you have some strong opinions on Hollywood and how Hollywood is purveying violence to the masses. Can you talk a little bit about how you might deal with that, in, let's say, even in the context of with your son, and how you might police a little bit what's coming into the house?
Well, remember, when we were kids, we just watched a series of cartoons. There wasn't a lot of them, but they tended to be pretty violent.
The cartoons were very violent.
Although we didn't necessarily think so.
Right.
But I've watched my son watch the old-style cartoons in which his levels of testosterone were crashing to his cranium and he was bouncing off the walls. And I said, no wonder why they've come to this conclusion. And then the newer cartoons, which actually convey more information, convey more messages, and have a softer side to it.
Right.
Although it's still entertaining.
Right.
I mean, he wants to turn the TV off, and I'm saying, no, let's keep watching it. You know, again, SpongeBob SquarePants. You know, whoever did that must have been in a drug-induced psychosis and on a bad acid trip. I mean, I get it as an adult, but my son, he gets, you know, Patrick, SpongeBob SquarePants, the Krabby, you know, all those things. Right. So it's great that you can enjoy it. It's stimulating for you as an adult. And it conveys, you know, good images to the child. It's not a negative image to the child.
Right.
But the early cartoons of our youth,
right.
Wow. Now that I look back at it, boy, they were violent. And then you see a series of the 30-second bites that we see on TV. There's a lot of violence.
Right.
And so you realize if my son or your daughter is just having a stream of this as the diet, how is this impacting on them? Well, you know, it's going to make them very jaded.
Right.
To violence, and they're going to think that it's common, that this is the way that the problems are handled, and it's going to be very difficult to get through because they're going to develop a veneer.
Right.
In the inner city, I see it all the time because these children, unfortunately, are exposed to it. A lot of times they don't have adult supervision, and unfortunately, between the diet, the images, the attack on their senses, you know, they're like on a razor's edge all the time. But if you have an opportunity to balance what your child is seeing, you certainly have to do that because from the news they watch to all the videos that are being flashed across them, you know, violence is just a way of handling problems. At least that seems to be the solution, both at our political level, you know, at the top levels of government, and then both at the ground level in the streets, in the neighborhoods, or even in the house.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. You know, one thing I'm interested in about your career, because it's something that I haven't been necessarily passionate about in a way that I would make it my career choice.
Sure.
How did you become so passionate about activism and helping empower people to empower themselves?
Well, I think a person becomes an activist because of those that are immediately around them who have an impact on them. That was my father, Chester, who was a merchant seaman for 46 years. A very learned individual, read a lot of books, was well-spoken, would tell stories. My grandfather on my mother's side, the Italian side, again, a great storyteller in terms of giving you like an Aesop's fable at the end, although he would be termed a knuckle dragger, a jadrul, you know, someone who couldn't read, couldn't write. But because of his many experiences, he was able to put it into story form and teach me, not only through his example, but by these great stories.
Right.
So I had two male role models who were great at conveying messages through stories.
Right.
Plus, they didn't really divert all that much as role models from the message of the story, because nobody's perfect. You see them in their imperfect ways, but as long as you don't see them in an extreme way, it doesn't shock the senses. And I think by looking at both of them, who are very involved in many, many things, it just stimulated me to want to get involved. And then naturally, I was being exposed to more things than they were, because I grew up in the 60s.
Right.
Don't trust anybody over 30.
Right.
You know, burn, baby, burn. I mean, the most extreme elements of the time and the more passive elements of the time, but everybody was challenging authority. I challenged authority everywhere I got. Problem is, I always ended up getting a boot shined on my backside, kicked to the curb, got kicked out of school, got kicked out of this group, got kicked out of that group. So I was lamenting early today when they were talking about PS 114 actually not being closed. The only school in New York that hasn't been closed. It was able to stave off its execution. I went to PS 114. It was the only place I ever got a graduation certificate from. Everywhere else, I got kicked to the curb. And that was really a product of the 60s, because there it was challenge authority, don't accept, rhetoric.
Right.
And make a difference. Don't just squawk and talk, but go out there and make a difference, and that's what I chose to do.
Right. Well, that was your classroom.
If I hadn't been born in the 60s, I would not be the person I am today. If I had been born in the 70s, with the Disco Ducks, or in the 50s, although I was born in the 50s, 54, but I really started absorbing things right with the election of John Kennedy and Richard Nixon, 1960. Boom. It was a galvanizing time.
Yeah, the zeitgeist of the moment.
No doubt, and particularly the Irish Christian nuns at St. Matthew's telling me that first St. Brendan the Navigator discovered the New World, which caused me a lot of grief in an Italian-American neighborhood. And secondly, your parents are going to vote for John Kennedy. He's a good Irish Catholic. You're not going to vote for that Quaker, Richard Nixon. I didn't even know what a Quaker was. You better not come back here and tell me that your parents voted for Richard Nixon on election day. I said, the nuns putting the arm on me over an election that I don't really understand much about. But I got a little taste of ward politics from a nun way back there.
So it sounds like you had some good characters in your life from early on.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's terrific. Tell us, how can people learn more about what you do and perhaps step up to the plate and become anti-crime activists themselves?
Well, all they have to do is go on the website, www.guardianangels.org, and they'll see a wide array of things we do. I mean, we're best known for putting boots on the ground, patrolling high-crime areas, being a visual deterrent, making citizens arrest, going into the belly of the beast where most people won't go. We're in 14 countries, 140 cities. We've been doing this for 32 years. But we have a role model academy. We have junior guardian angels. We have programs for those who are like 6 to 15 who can't do what we do as seniors. But we make sure they stay out of harm's way. We give them character education. We teach them discipline, respect. And most importantly, we do it in an interracial environment with young girls and young boys together as equals. And we start trying to assimilate them into this concept that you got to be a giver, not a taker. You got to give to your community. Even in the smallest of ways, it's all important. So you start them at a young age, as I was started at a young age, and you just develop more and more of a hunger to do that. And in having existed for 32 years, we've seen many of the young men and young women go on to become real contributors to their communities, no matter how poor their circumstances or no matter how difficult it's been for them, because they didn't necessarily have the education or the skills to do things that maybe they wanted to do, but they just didn't have the ability to do.
Right. It's amazing. It's amazing work. I appreciate so much that you do this for the world, and I appreciate so much that you came here today to talk with us for Parents with Angst.
Oh, pleasure. And I have lots of angst. In fact, I got a goiter problem. I can't even find my goiter. I have so much angst. Being a parent, I'm always wrong. I'm never right, according to my wife. So I try. I keep trying. It's angst. It's angst.
Thank you so much, Curtis.
Oh, appreciate it. Thank you.